Hello, friends. Check in with us. Where are you from tonight? Before I reveal my face to you, we have people from the West Midlands, people from Bedford.
Got people from India.
India, Lincolnshire, Canada. This is remarkable. Leeds Lass in Teesside. Are you lost? Are you okay? Good afternoon from... I'm not Excelsior. I'm going to pronounce it Excelsior, Missouri. From Australia. Grays, Essex. This is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Northamptonshire. Hello, everybody, indeed. Hello, indeed. Well, I have to say, first and foremost, I am ruddy staggered by the sheer volume of people watching tonight. I have, over the last 10 months of my and your very peculiar lives, been delivering ghostly tours of the city of York, where we are currently standing now. And it's been an odd one. It's an odd one. Lockdown 1, 2, 3 here for us in the good old United Kingdom. And we're making the most of it. We are making the very, very most of it as best as we can. This obviously is a virtual tour of the city of York. We will be going on a little bit of an exploration through the streets, through the wet cobbles, through the dark, shadowy, sinister areas. We'll be visiting some of the more famous landmarks that, if you're familiar with the city, you may well know, like that one over there. Look over there. This is definitely just lurking up there in the near distance. There's the York Minster, and we should be with her in around about half an hour, 45 minutes. You see, normally when we do something like this, there is a plan, there is a route. But as it's a sort of exploration tonight, I'm just going to go where the gut takes me. I'm just going to see exactly what happens. Now, one final thing to mention, and I'll mention it now, and then I will mention it again at the end of the night, and I'll mention it nay further, is that this is, of course, entirely free for you to watch and enjoy. But I do implore you, if you do enjoy tonight, if you do have a wonderful hour and 15, 20 minutes, depending on how long this thing lasts for, please do consider doing what we used to do at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Any kind of fringe festival where you can go sit and watch something for free and then the hat goes out. Pay what you feel. That's the term we like to use. If you hate it, don't pay anything. If you bloody love it, give me £1,000. Why not? You've got a chance. You've got to roll the dice on these things. But now, obviously, this is a very peculiar time for a tour guide such as myself, because I can't really do any touring or guiding outside of what's going on here right now. And after this, of course, I am going to be taking a small break. I've been working pretty much flat out, doing several of these a month, mixed in with Tales from the Fireplace, mixed in with podcasts, mixed in with radio shows and whatnot. And I'm feeling it a little bit. So I am going to allow myself, I'm going to do what a lot of people did in lockdown 1, which is put my feet up for a bit. I'm going to enjoy just a few weeks off to kind of, recuperate and get myself back to my usual full, I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, I'm going to get myself back there. Shall we start? Let's start. Welcome, friends, to the city of York. I'm going to go up here to the wonderful city of York. Now, the first thing you need to know about York is it's old. It's proper old. Think of a number. It's more than that. It's incredibly old, okay? We're going to roll back to what a lot of people think to be the beginning of the city of York, which was when the Romans arrived in 71 AD, and they settled in, and then off we went, 2,000 almost years. But a lot of people don't know that we were actually kicking around the place for thousands of years before that. It's estimated there has been some kind of human life just farting and breathing and humping and just making the place awful and a bit smelly for around 10,000 years. We've been known as the capital city of executions. We have been known for our murders, our betrayals. It is believed there are over 500,000 bodies beneath the streets of the city of York, or Jorvik, or York, or Effervik, or Ibarak, or whatever you want to call it. So therefore, it's no wonder that the grass is always green on a warm summer's day due to the fertilization of the bodies coming up through the soil. The drains do tend to smell a little bit on a hot summer's day also, and we are oft referred to as the most haunted city in all of England, if not the entire world. What an intro, right? My name's Dorian Deathley. I'll be your tour guide for the night. Can I just flip round? I'd like to introduce you to my partner in crime. This here is Mrs. Dee Dee Deathley. Mrs. Dee Dee Deathley. There you go. Hello. She'll be operating the gadgets tonight. I have a little wireless microphone connected to myself, so I should be coming through good and proper. I saw fleetingly there, someone said, I'm in York. Please don't walk past my house. I mean, I can't make any promises, mostly because I don't know where your house is. So if I do walk past your house, it's a complete coincidence. Now, we're starting our tour tonight here in Exhibition Square, which was created in 1879. And this building over here is the King's Manor. It's now part of the University of York. Look at the state of it. Look, the dark silhouetting of the trees, the low install. They knew what they would when they lit this building up. They knew what they were. They knew what they were doing. Look at that, lights down, nice and low. And before I get into the stories of this is something I need to address. I've been very, very clear about this in the description of the events. We do not use any paranormal, psychic-y, gadgety machinery, anything like that. We don't have any spirit boxes or K2 machines. We don't have any sage or chalk. We may employ something like that in the future with someone that knows how it works, someone that knows how to utilize it better. But I am predominantly a storyteller, and that is what I'll be doing tonight. I'll be taking you around the city and telling you the stories of the hauntings. And King's Manor tonight is our first one. Let's go for a little bit of a loop round, see if we don't get arrested by the security men. Now, King's Manor, this was a home at one point. Very well-established people. Catherine Howard, sort of King Henry VIII's wife, she loved it here. She absolutely adored staying in this building. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the history of King Henry VIII and all of his wives and whatnot. But what you need to know is that Catherine Howard didn't last very long because she got a little bit naughty. And she started spending a little bit of time behind closed doors with a fellow by the name of Thomas Culpeper. Thomas Culpeper was Henry VIII's favourite male courtesan. So when he found out that the two of them were having it large in private, but the old honky-ponky, as the kids like to say, he felt double sting of betrayal. His wife and someone who he possibly considered to be a close friend. He had them both executed. Now, it's believed that Catherine Howard's spirit returned here to the King's Manor, and she has often been seen, very long, lacy, old-fashioned dress, moving by the windows. Have a little bit of a peek, see if you can see anything moving around. If you do see anything, shout out, do let us know. They say that she's often accompanied by a low-hanging sensation of dread, a feeling that something is just not quite right. Now, there's an argument here as to what these moans are. Are they moans of agony, or are they moans of ecstasy? There's a fine line, they say, between pleasure and pain. That's all I'm saying. Some have even asked the question if the wailing of perhaps pleasure or agony are actually the wails of Catherine Howard at all, or whether they are in fact the wails of none other than the old soldiers. You see, this area was used as a triage centre during the Civil War. Lots of people getting their legs blown off and limbs flying off in all sorts of directions. And back in the olden days, as will become very clear before the end of the night, we were not particularly good at medicine here in England in the olden days. A lot of people lost their lives screaming and begging for it to end in the darkness. This site in particular been very active. There's a couple of pubs dotted around. Maybe we'll end up visiting one or two tonight. We can't get in them at the moment, obviously due to lockdown. But there's one, the Old Eastari Inn on Stone Gate. We'll be visiting Stone Gate. I think we will visit that pub, but we can't obviously get in. That was also basement. Basement was used to try and jam the bits and pieces back together. But yes, very peculiar indeed. There's a statue just over here. We won't talk about him much, but you might just be able to spot him lurking over there near the fountain. That's a statue of a man by the name of William Etty. He was a playwright, a sculptor, a photographer. He was very good at painting people standing around with all the bits hanging out. So we've got lots of his work laminated for, preservation purposes, no other reason. Can't think what you're possibly talking about. But before we press on and leave Exhibition Square behind us, what we have here is Bootham Bar, one of the main entranceways into the city of York. Now, if you haven't been to York before, one thing that often surprises people is how it's completely surrounded in stone. There's a circular-ish wall kind of hugging it and keeping people in, or maybe keeping something out. In the olden days, it was to keep, the ruffians out. There was a point when that thing had a big tunnel poking out the front of it. If we didn't like the look of you, they could execute you, murder you on the spot. Some of the bars, as they're known, Barbican tunnels, people making their way underneath them, they have said that they feel a very strange sensation of dread, a kind of omnipresent sensation that something's looking down at them, particularly Walngate Bar. That's a very enclosed one. The Barbican tunnel still remains. I don't think we'll make it over there tonight. York is quite small, but it's quite dense. So you can't really get through everything. All the ghost tours in York, we've all got our individual routes we have to choose. Now, before we go any further, I'm about to approach the York Theatre Royal. You may have noticed, I just felt that was the way. I thought I'm going to go through the Bootham Bar, I'm going to go to Gilligate. I feel like the Theatre Royal's the way to go. You may have noticed I'm just swaddled like a newborn baby tonight. I have 2 pairs of gloves on, long johns right up over the parts, all the way up to the nipples. It's currently 1 degree here in York, and it's a cold one. I'm not particularly happy about the situation, but in the name of art and the name of the supernatural spooky ookiness, we shall continue with this York Theatre Royal. Now, what we'll do is we'll tuck ourselves away. I apologise, there'll be a bit of a road noise in this section of the tour. Once we get past, I think I know where I'm going to go next. Actually, maybe I'll ask you lot where you want me to go next after this one. I'm just going to tuck myself away ever so slightly out of the way and just bring things down a touch. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have the York Theatre Royal. Now, the Theatre Royal itself is actually built atop the old foundations of the church and hospital of St. Leonard's, an absolutely ruddy, massive building that used to span this site more than you could possibly imagine. There are actually small glass blocks inside of the Theatre Royal, mainly near the restaurant. You can stand on top of them, you can look down, and you can see the original foundations of yesteryear. It's absolutely peculiar, dating back to almost the 1100s. Now, it's a theatre now, but there is a story that predates this. Now, I'm going to split this story into 2 halves tonight, I think. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what's seen and what's sighted. And then later on in the night, I'm going to tell you what happened that led to this haunting. The Grey Lady of York. Now, this is something that tends to happen around the country. Colourful ladies, grey ladies, white ladies, pink ladies, brown ladies. Edinburgh, of course, their theatre has the brown lady. Scarborough Castle has the white lady. We have the famous photos of the pink lady making her way down the staircase. Here in York, we have the grey lady. Now, she's often seen taking on slightly bizarre forms. Some say they see her appear as a small glowing orb with a thin piece of ragged cloth trailing loosely behind it. People performing on the stage, they look up towards the cheap seats and they see an image of a woman impossibly tall staring down at them. In fact, once this bus, go on, clear off, gets out the way, you'll be able to see the degree. Get a move on, we need to look at that building. Bloody rude. Oh, listen to me, look at that. That's right, the power of the tour guide. Jog on, Mr. Bus. No, don't. Oh, thought he was going to ram through the building then. You'll see this little cluster of white bricks here. This is the De Grey Rooms of York. Now, to the left of it, you can see the tall, stretched out, elongated windows. People have actually said that they've seen silhouetted through the curtains closed, lights on. They say they've seen a silhouette of a woman, but impossibly tall, 8 or 9 foot, with her hands hanging by her side, with the fingers twice, thrice as long as they have any, quite frankly, reason to be. Actors getting ready for a final dress rehearsal. They hear her fingers scraping on the inside of the dressing room walls. Communicational headsets employed by the theatre staff to let everyone know what's going on. They hear her whisper, just a handful of desperate words tumbling out over the system. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out! Sorry, Mrs. D. Sorry. Oh, she farted. That was outrageous. I heard it just popped out. Just popped out. But yes, we'll come back to the Grey Lady before the night is through, because there's a part of York that contains something very familiar to what happened to her all those years ago. So, we're approaching an area now, and the question you have to give me an answer to is left or right? Left or right? Left or right? What are you saying? Left. You're saying left. They want to see Guy Fawkes? The Guy Fawkes Inn? Okay. Well, we could probably get there either way. Left or right? Left or right? What do you reckon? We're approaching the junction. Mrs. Deathley's going to make the choice on the great ghost hunt. We're going to go to the left. We're going to go to the... Oh, that's a nice lamp. Look at that cheeky little monkey lamp there. If anyone knows where to get a cheeky monkey lamp from, let me know. I quite want that in my living room. So left or right, what do we get? Are we going to get a sort of feedback yet? Left or right? Left or right? Left? Left. Left? We're getting left? Right then left. Right then left. What about... We can't go up or down, unfortunately. What do we got? What do you reckon the consensus is? Lots of people want the Guy Fawkes Inn. They want the Guy Fawkes Inn. Lovely. Lovely. Okay. Dunham. It's just gone, isn't it? Yeah, I don't think. I mean, we can't go back in time. If you strain really hard. I think there's a Dunham Mill now on the outside. What, do you want me to go pick you up some pillows or something? Get some nice blankets or whatever? We're obeying this at the moment. If you wonder why we're stopped, we're being very good, well-behaved citizens. We're behaving ourselves. Okay, we'll go this way and we'll head towards the Guy Fawkes Inn. But oh gosh, that's loud. Sorry about that. But now I know I did a little fart there. Outrageous. So we're going to make our way through. And the good news is that as we make our way towards the Guy Fawkes Inn, you also get to enjoy this prematurely. Now, obviously, I was planning on heading here a little bit later on, but as we've now diverted and made our way through towards where the Guy Fawkes Inn is, there she blows. Lovely old bird. Now, actually, on the way round here, we did spot a lovely little situation, didn't we? We spotted a bit of a peculiar light going on, so we can go and have a little bit of a look at that. I think we might just let people enjoy the Minster for a brief moment. Ooh. Tour guide falls off pavement, kills self. Happy birthday to... Oh yes, in this brief moment we have a sort of a happy birthday announcement to give. Our beloved... well, double congratulations actually. A beloved happy birthday to our intern, Daphne Deathley, who of course has supported us so much throughout this entire 10-month period that she's now become a part of the Deathley family. So let's all just have a quick happy birthday in the comments to Daphne. And of course, congratulations to Dolores, because Dolores, of course, is celebrating, I do believe, her 11th anniversary with her good gentleman friend today. What a time. It's good to find the little celebrations, you know, especially in moments like this. Not that I'm not implying a birthday or an 11th year celebration is a small celebration by any means, but obviously these are unprecedentedly gloomy times. Now, you said you wanted the Guy Fawkes Inn, which of course is down there. But first, we're going to go over here. And how could we not? And here, my friends, I'm going to present you with a selection of two stories. Before I start them, I'll sort of give you a quick overview of each one, and then we'll show you a very interesting little model that stands here. So there are two stories to be had here. One of them involves arson and madness. The other one involves, shall we say, tragedy and a monochromatic haunting, a black and white haunting. So you have two stories there. You can either have a tale of arson or a tale of loss and sadness. Let us know in the comments which one you want. Now, while we're waiting to decide which one, let's enjoy this. Is one of my favourite things in York. This is the York Millennium project, and a lot of people don't know that this exists. What I like about this is that you can stand above it and pretend you're some kind of giant. Because this is the Minster right here. This here is the York Minster. We're currently standing just here, just outside the front of it there. Now, we started our tour tonight, let me just get my bearings, just through here, I think that's right, isn't it? Sort of turns your head around a little bit, doesn't it? Yes, Booth and Bar. So we started at the art gallery, which was right there. And then we sort of made our way around in a little bit of a weird shape, and there we have it, the York Minster. You can't take any of it. Please, also, don't come and paint it.
A resounding win for loss and sadness.
Loss and sadness. Loss and sadness it is then. Very well. The York Minster, standing here beside me, and also in a small version right here. There was a gentleman who worked in this wonderful building. Now, very quick rundown of the place before we begin. The Minster, of course, to give it its full and proper title, the Metropolitical Church of St. Peter here in York, something like that. That's why we call it the Minster, because no one's got time for all those syllables. It began its life, the earlier part of the last millennium, as a garden shed sort of affair, very hastily built out of wood to baptise a local monarch by the name of King Ecgbert. He didn't last very long. Parking one's buttocks on the throne of England was quite a perilous thing to do in the olden times. Over the years, it's changed and adapted. It's now got this wonderful Gothic architecture. We're currently not renovating it, we're restoring it. Maybe we'll end up going past the stonemason's yard later on, see how the wind blows us. Yeah, they're sort of always up there. You'll see scaffolding around the other side later on, where they have to constantly be reforming and shaping and sculpting it, because it's not, to be truth be told, made out of the most resilient of stones. Now, in the 1700s, it wouldn't have looked greatly different to this. A few pieces over the years have been on fire. That's the story that you told me not to tell you. But in the 1700s, there was a gentleman here by the name of Dean Gale, and Dean Gale, he was a very important religious man that worked here, and he loved this building with all of his heart. And how could you not? Genuinely, how on earth could you not? Now, he would attend every single service without fail, and he would sit in the exact same pew, in the exact same seat. No matter how busy he was, no matter what stresses life threw his way, he would turn up prompt. He would sit there with a big old smile on his face, and he'd watch the service take place. Tragically, he passed away. He died. His body, I believe, actually in situ in this very building to this very day. Now, it was a week or two after when he passed away, when a gentleman was delivering a service, and this service had a remembrance section entirely dedicated to the story of Dean Gale and all of the good and wonderful things that he did. And the gentleman, he climbed up into the pulpit, and he got all of his papers shuffled and in order, and he took a deep breath, and he stopped, and he stared, stock still, unblinking, unflinching, unmoving at this particular spot. Everyone sat in the hall began to sort of awkwardly look around at each other. Is he all right? What's going on? This is very peculiar. Somebody wandered over, gave him a little bit of a prod. Nothing happened. Then gave him a sharp tug on the jacket, at which point he inhaled violently and fell, stumbled down a couple of steps, scrambled back on all fours, and started gibbering incoherently. Then they got a couple of snifters of gin inside of him, calmed him down, and they asked him what had happened. He said, as he stood there, about to say the opening words of his remembrance, Dean Gale. He looked out into the seating, and he saw, sitting there, without a drop of colour to his form, the image of Dean Gale himself. Nothing moving, no clothes, no hair, no blink of an eye, just a wide grin spread from ear to ear, with his eyes locked upon his own. Now the thing is, this is a fairly famous ghost story. It's not perhaps well known as the Grey Lady of the Theatre Royal. But here's where things become interesting. Over the years, so many people have seen that image of that grey-toned man sitting in that exact same seat, unblinking, unmoving, so clear, apparent, and as crystal that so many have asked the staff, do you have a recreator? That actor you've got sitting in the, it looks fantastic, very authentic clothing, to which, of course, a lot of the staff often reply, got genuinely no idea what you're talking about. Now, of course, in brighter, happier times, the York Minster is open to explore, to venture into, to go and have a little bit of a shuffle around. See, you can go all the way to the tippity top of the thing. And I do urge you to. You can see some of the gargoyles and the grotesqueries poking out there. And if you do end up anywhere near the Minster, and you happen to have some binoculars, one of the wonderful things to do is to scan yourself around, because there are a couple of them that were clearly given a free rein. One of the sculptors or two clearly went to the foreman and said, well, what is it you'd like us to do? What do you want me to do with this block of stone? And the guy just went, I don't know, do whatever you want. And let me tell you, some imaginations ran wild. There is one, where I don't think I can recreate it, I'm not quite flexible enough, where there's a gentleman holding onto the back of his legs, and he's got himself bent all the way over, flipped right down, with his head sort of poking out here, with his tongue sticking out, and it's supposed to represent the plague, the grotesqueness of the Black Death. Can you smell burning? That's strange. Where's that coming from? Is it through here? And that's just a flickering street lamp. It's gone now. Maybe we should move along, Mrs. Daphne. You don't want to tempt fate or whatever. They wanted the Guy Fawkes in, so shall we give it to them? Yes, it's over this way. Follow me. Now, as we make our way forward, Guy Fawkes, Guido Fawkes, as he was once known at one point, he was born and raised here in York. Now, the exact building in which he was born is very much debated. A few places claim. We know it was around this area. The one thing we do know is that he was baptised at St. Michael the Belfry, just over here, in front of us. God, the last time I was out here doing one of these, there were Christmas lights everywhere. It was very festive. It's not quite as cheerful now as it once was. I suppose you've got to take the Christmas lights down at some point. I mean, we haven't. We've just sort of decided to leave them up until the end of lockdown. It brings a little bit of joy into the world. But yes, St. Michael the Belfry over here. And the Guy Fawkes Inn is just in front of us here. There she is. Now, Guy Fawkes is an interesting one, a very peculiar spirit. Very interesting, to me at least, for a few reasons. Sort of similar to how Dick Turpin is a bit of an interesting spirit, due to the widely varying... Let's just enjoy that for a moment, shall we? Something very reassuring about them, isn't there? Very nice. Oh, they're all at it now. They're fighting for dominance. We'll have 8 big dongs, I believe, to let us know that the night is well and truly underway. Well, yes, in a similar fashion to how Dick Turpin is often seen in York, sometimes charging around Essex, Guy Fawkes is another one, very similar. He's often seen in London. He's often seen here in York, various sites. Now, the one I've been told of the most is that Guy Fawkes' spirit actually haunts, I believe it's the court. What's the name of the court? It's the one that sits on the banks of the River Ouse. Big beige building. If anyone can remember it off the top of their heads, do let me know. Now, Guy Fawkes, of course, he fell in line with a few wrong-uns. And most of us know him, of course, to remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. Now, there's a few interesting little spins and twists to the story of Guy Fawkes that I'm a big fan of. Ultimately, we do know, of course, he was found under the Houses of Parliament with a lit match and a load of explosives. But the thing that sometimes history skips over is that apparently he was let go the first time because a guard found him, asked him who he was, what he was doing there, and he kind of replied, I'm here to check the pipes. He said his name was John Johnson, and the guard went, oh, all right then. So we gave the pipes a little bit of a wobble, and then off he went. He went back a few days later. Of course, this time maybe a slightly sharper guard on duty. Who are you? What are you doing? I'm John Johnson. I'm here to check the pipes. Well, there aren't any pipes down here, Mr. Johnson. If you'd like to come with me, please. And please accept some splinters under the fingernails, some red-hot things, post right up where red-hot things shouldn't be posted, maybe fold a few limbs the wrong way round. Now, of course, he was a good, strong Yorkshire fella. Despite the fact he travelled the world, all of the tricks and trades that he learnt, he was a good, hard Yorkshire fella, and he survived 10 days of torture, 10 horrific days of the most incredible torture you could imagine. And it is believed that he only finally caved and gave away his true identity, the plot, the plan, and the co-conspirators when finally, he found out that all of his friends and indeed co-conspirators had been apprehended. There is a parchment of a confession that contains his signature, and I use that word very loosely indeed. It's an illegible scrawl. It almost looks like a lot of spiders that have been battered into the paperwork. It's his arms and legs, his fingers have been broken and shattered, and then they asked him to sign his name on the confession, which obviously didn't go very well. They executed him publicly. He was hanged, drawn and quartered. As you can see, Guy Fawkes in here says, born here 1570. He was executed on the 31st of January 1606, I believe it was. Is that right? Oh, you know it's right, because you're looking right at us. I wish I'd seen that before I took a wild guess. 31st of January 1606. Lovely stuff. He was dead long before they got too far into the hanging, drawing and quartering. You see, they marched him out towards the site of execution. The streets were packed with people. His arms and legs were all being dislocated and pulled in and pulled out. I don't know if any of you lot have ever tried to climb a ladder after your arms and legs have been dislocated a few times. It does not go well. He fell or slipped or jumped, some people like to think. He took a little bit of a tumble and he landed on his neck, broke it, shattered the old spine, dead before they could clamber him. But a show's a show, and people had gathered there to watch him go, so they hoyed him and dragged him up into the street. Now, the hanging and the drawing and the quartering is a very long and drawn-out process, a very laborious one. I believe, not the worst way to go, although it's sort of difficult to compare and contrast. Not many people are willing to put themselves through these kind of experimentations. But they would hang you by the neck till you were nearly dead. They would then cut you down. They would tie you to the back of a horse. This was sometimes done with you on a wooden pallet, sometimes not. You would be dragged through the streets, bouncing up and down all over the place. Then they would put you on a rack. They'd stretch your arms and legs out nice and wide until everything popped out their sockets. Sometimes they would make an incision from the neck all the way down to the pelvis. They would peel back the flesh, crack open the old rib cage like a book, and just start tearing out your internal organs one by one. If you're of a gentlemanly persuasion, and there's no lost sense of irony here, one of the final things that they would chop off your body was your John Johnson. They would then skewer it on a metal spike. They would then burn it over an open campfire like a marshmallow. Ooh, like a flump. Like a flump. Chop off your head, cut your body into 4 pieces, head on a spike, and then they would bury your pieces in the 4 corners of the compass. The idea being that if they were in unmarked graves and spread away so far, the spirit would be unable to find peace. Ooh, Ooh, proper wrongins, right? Proper wrongins. Okay. What's that, sorry? Please do have a look in some of these. Oh, Jesus Christ. It's a mannequin's dummy. Sometimes I see things. So there's a phenomenon that we refer to many times here during the Deathly Dark Tours. We become a bit fascinated with, and it's called pareidolia. The fascination of pareidolia is when you see something that perhaps isn't in something. So a face in the clouds, a jacket hanging off the back of a coat stand that takes on a sinister form, tricking the mind, you might say, into thinking it's something else. That's pareidolia. And I just had a brief spell of it. Then when I looked up, I saw the tailor's dummy there with the white hands staring down at me. And for a brief moment, I was like, it's all very sinister. But yes, please do enjoy the high-up buildings. That's one thing I do urge people to do in York, and that is look up. Look up. You see down at the bottom all the lovely shops and whatnot. This is Petergate, high and low Petergate here. The street's so long we have it high and low Petergate. We had these wonderful shops, all manner of goods on display, and they're all wonderful. But it's when you start to look upwards, you really do see the history. Actually, that's wonderfully timed that we have arrived here. And I'll give you another left or right situation in a minute. But I do just want to stop here very briefly, because this is one of my favourite streets in York. This is Minster Gates. Now, just very quickly, I'll explain the gate thing. If you've ever been to York, you might have noticed that a lot of our streets end in gate. Micklegate, Monkgate, Skeldergate, Swinegate. This is Minster Gate. Gate is the old-fashioned word for street. It's as simple as that. So this is Minster Street. It was once known as Bookbinder Lane. It was once known as Bookyard Lane, because it was at one point an entire street full of bookshops. And there is one remaining right here, the old books can be purchased from this lovely shop here, the lovely leather-bound collections, and they would have all been the same, and they've kept a similar frontage. Now, the reason why I say to look up is if you do indeed look up here, you can see the kind of mix-mash of history. You can see the different styles of the architecture. You can see, what's that?
The time tapestry.
The time tapestry, that's what Mrs. Deathley likes to call it, the time tapestry. And here we have the remnants, just at the front of the Minster Gates, of the window taxes. Now, this isn't a particularly haunting story, it's just taxes are quite terrifying, truth be told, but just up here, you can see that there are a number of windows that are bricked up and then painted in. They're weird, aren't they? It's very subtle, you just don't notice it, because if you look to the ones to the left, that's a real window, and if you look to the ones to the right, that's a fake window. This is to do with a series of taxes that the rich people tried to impose on us. The more windows you had, the more tax you have to pay. At one point, the more bricks the house had, the more tax you had to pay, the more fireplaces you had. If you had printed wallpaper, in the north, we're sharp as bloody tax. As soon as the window tax came in, we just quite frankly started throwing furniture and small children and pets or whatever we had to hand through the windows. We bricked them up and we went to the tax man. When they started imposing that the more bricks your house had, the more tax you would pay, do you know what we did? Bigger bricks. Bloody brilliant. Then, of course, came the tax on patterned wallpaper, because one of the Queens of England didn't like patterned wallpaper, so we just kind of took it off the walls and had bare brick walls for a little while instead. But before we leave Minster Gate, there's a really fascinating ghost story that may or may not be true. Now, it fooled me, this one. This is a story that I have told on my actual walking tour for a very long time, because it's one of my favourite stories. But then recently, a fellow tour guide of mine, Mackenzie from Shadows of York, I watched one of her tours and it was wonderful. And she pointed to something out that I didn't even know. And I'm going to tell you about it now. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this with you. The story dates back to the earlier history of the city of York. And the version I've heard, there's two versions of this story. There's one that says it happened in the Minster, and there's one that says it happened here on Bookyard Lane. Now, the story goes that, follow me, Mr. Teffley, the story goes that, it's just a a very healthy person there looking at, please don't film me while I'm jogging. Running for fun. Lunacy. Well done. Much better person than I am. This is the most exercise I've had in about 5 weeks. Yes, Bookbinder Lane. There was a young girl. She was at a tour party. And she broke away from the tour party because, as I've urged you to do, she was looking up. And she was just... she lived in the countryside, and I'm not saying that York is a sprawling metropolis, but Mrs. Deathley and I were very fortunate enough to visit New York City in November 2019, and one of the first things we did when we walked out into the middle of New York, we went, oh my God, didn't we? We just sort of looked up, and I had a moment where I had to sort of go, ooh, and I got vertigo. I genuinely got vertigo, and that was something that would happen to here, the people of York. They would come here into York. Let's just tuck ourselves in this little corner here out of the way, and they would get vertigo. They were used to these low buildings, 1 or 2 floors, and suddenly you've got 3, 4, 5 floors all over the place, and they just couldn't quite comprehend them. She was here on Bookbinder Lane on her own when suddenly a hand fell on her shoulder, and it turned her round ever so slowly, and staring at her in the face was a man with scruffled wild hair. How's that? And he said to her a simple sentence. He simply said, there is a future state, before just disappearing out of shot completely. Now, oh, you've ruined it now. Now, the young girl was very bemused by this. She couldn't quite understand what the sentence had meant. But the one thing that stuck with her was that she did, in fact, know the man from somewhere. Well, he was older, more gnarled and twisted, but she just couldn't place where she knew him from. She returned home. A few weeks went by, and then there was one day a knock at the door. And there was a young gentleman wearing a naval officer's uniform, and he handed with a trembling hand across the threshold, I'm so sorry, a letter. And that letter contained the worst possible news. The news was that their youngest son, her younger brother, had been lost to sea. The date and the time of the incident were listed within the parchment, and it lined up perfectly to the moment that the young girl saw the man here on the street, except older. 20, 30, 40 years, she couldn't quite recall. As time went on, it became fuzzier. But she knew in that moment that the man that she saw was indeed her younger brother. They'd made a promise when they were children. You've got to imagine that in the olden days, a few hundred years ago, if you were, let's say, forced to stay inside of your homes with your families for several months on end, you didn't have quite the volume of entertainment that we have at the moment. You couldn't sit there and try to complete Netflix 3 times in a row. You had to talk to each other. You had to communicate and share the stories, get to know. And they started talking about death and what happens, what's waiting for us on the other side. They made a promise. Whoever came back from the other side would allow the other one to know if there was life after death. Now, there are 2 interesting byproducts of this story. Number 1, if he died and then came straight back, why did he appear so much older? Well, a lot of us in the spookology, that's the career, that's the science that I apply myself at, the science of spookology. It's believed that if you were to bring yourself back from the other side, it is such a phenomenally difficult thing to do, to tear apart the void, that it can in fact age and weather the soul. I think he forgot for about 4 decades, and one day he was on his way to get a Greggs and get a steak bake, and he just went, oh bloody hell. But then of course that implies that ghosts can time travel. And then the more you think about that, the more the headache starts to kick in, and then you start buying books off the internet, you get a weird hat, a long coat, and this is what you're doing for a career in your early 40s. Ooh, so where do we want to go? That's the question. Where do we want to go? Where do we want to go? So, look at me, where I am now. If we go to the left, we're going to be talking about the Plague House. We're going to be talking about Beddon of York. We'll probably hit that later on. It just depends which one you want to go first. If we go to the right, we'll be going down Stonegate. We'll have the tale of the tragic doctor's house, and of course the longest snickleway in the city of York, Coffee Yard, and this tale of the bar guest. So, to the left, Plague House. To the right, Bar Guest, the Demon Dog of York. Let's see what they want to do. I feel like I should have some sort of countdown music, like boom. What are we getting?
Plague House, Stonegate,
Stonegate. I'll give him 10 more seconds.
Shambles.
We'll get to the Shambles, don't you worry.
Left again. Both.
Both will happen, but which one do you want first? 5, 4...
The next comment I see.
2...
Plague house.
1. Plague house. Let's go this way. Very good. Okay, so I've got to do a little bit of dancing around now then. Oh, actually, let's... I've just seen the Minster police having a little chat with a group of people. It's probably best to not get involved. So, sorry about that. I gave you the illusion of choice and then I tore it away from you like an absolute pirate. There we go. Through we go. So, Stonegate it is. Stonegate it is. Don't panic. We will get to the sites that we have discussed. Lots and lots of places. Looking up. Look at this gloriousness. Gloriousness. Yes, I know what we'll do. We'll go this, we'll loop around, and then we'll come back to the side. I've got it. So, the good news is, there's a nice bit of light here. Come on in. So this is number 41 Stonegate. Now, I mentioned earlier on, Ye Olde Starley Inn. That is just a little bit further down there on the right-hand side. Now, this, at the moment, is the Antiques Centre, York. Whew, I got it the right way round. There's another one in York that's got a very similar name to it, and I sometimes get them mixed up, but this is the Antique Centre, York, number 41 Stonegate. It's bloody massive. If you're new to the page, you can actually get yourself onto, I believe it's on our YouTube channel now. Our YouTube channel, you can watch an entire hour and 15-minute long paranormal exploration of this building. Yes, Mrs. Stephanie.
I think we might have seen something.
We've seen something. What have we?
Onto the antique.
Oh, yes. And interestingly, yes, of course. That somebody was watching the exploration that we did of this building, and something very bloody weird was seen on some CCTV cameras that we found. I won't spoil it. I'll let you enjoy it. Now, it's surrounded by lovely toy shops and bars and restaurants. It's massive. There's a basement here. There's the ground floor, the first floor, the second floor, the third floor. It stretches back, I would say, 7 or 8 times as deep as the street. Is that fair to say? I think that's about fair to say, isn't it? It's absolutely enormous. It is overflowing with history. There's a ghost. There's a lost ghost. Oh no, she's figured it out. So this house was once indeed a house. And it was a house that was owned by a doctor. And this doctor was a very, very wealthy individual. He had one single daughter. Now, to give you an idea of how rich he was, it's likely that he might have owned some of the property nearby. There would have been maybe 10, 15 people sharing each bay window here, all crammed in. Maybe not on this street, but that's how the poverty gap was. On the Shambles, there were people crammed in together. Here, all of this space belonged to just 2 of them. Now, on a weekend, he would have these amazing parties. He would throw these grand and eloquent shindigs. The 1%, the old fruity ooh-la-la of the city of York would descend here, and they would party hard until the small hours of the morning. Now, the young girl, her name is argued. It's really argued. Some say that she's called Molly because of Molly's tea room. Some people say Florence. We've heard Flossie. I've heard Florentine. I've heard Abigail. I've heard Rachel. There is so many different names given to her. All we know is that they end in the same tragic way. She used to hear the parties, and there is a long winding staircase that makes its way right up the middle of the building. Snakes its way right to the top where her bedroom was. And she would stand on the banister, and she would watch the parties as they tumbled by. And every time it happened, her father would spot her and would go running up the stairs, pick her up, and lovingly put her back to bed, back to safety. Until tragically one night, he went out to get himself a bit of a restock, a few bottles of wine for the party. The young girl saw her opportunity and she started leaning over the edge, and down she went. 1, 2, 3, 4 floors. She died instantly. The party guests could not quite comprehend what they had just witnessed. Sobered in a moment, they all poured out into the street here and closed the door on her cooling corpse. A few moments went by and the gentleman, a father, comes around the corner of Petergate here, and he sees all of his friends gathered here, and he says, "What's wrong? Why are you all standing out here in the street? What's possibly happened?" They tried to stop him from entering the building, but a father's strength when his child is in peril is beyond comprehension. Parents' strength, the adrenaline that rushed through, they tore the door open and this animalistic roar was heard. He slammed the door and he started piling up furniture. He knew as a scientific man that once they came to take her away, he would see her never again. Now, eventually, common sense and clarity came back. She was taken. The funeral happened. He returned to the building. He was never the same again. The parties never returned. He locked himself away inside of number 41 Stonegate, and he worked and worked and worked and toiled until the day he died. On the day he died, he was laying in his bed. He was looking into the corner of the room, and suddenly a smile crept over his face. Everyone in the room turned to look to the corner where they saw nothing. And the man simply said, "I knew she was waiting for me." Number 41 Stonegate. One of the saddest ghost stories in York. Very changeable, lots of different versions of it. Excuse me. I just showing your shell, Mrs. Deathley, for a quick bit of hydration. I was using my sad husky voice for quite a lot of that. Oh, that's wee. Oh, was that yours?
Nope.
It's got bits of ham in it. Ugh. So let's make our way down here. Now, we could spend a good hour on Stonegate, but we're going to go straight here into the longest snickleway of York, because I'd very much like to get you round to that plague house before the time is up. What was that? What is that? Your magical drifting hands. The Red Devil of York. So these are all remnants of when this was a prince's area. The Red Devils of York, the Princess Devils, were imps that were often blamed for any misprinting or a spill of the ink. If when the print was set and something was wrong, they would blame the Princess Devils. When people became less superstitious, the Princess Devils became the nickname of the prince's apprentices. The little children that were helping, they were known as the Princess Devils. There's a few of them dotted around York, but here we are. Here we are. Coffee Yard, the longest snickleway in the city of York. There is a story of a demon dog that lurks within the darkness of these parts. The bar guest of York, the demon dog. Bar guest, bear ghost, town ghost. It appears to those unfortunate enough to see it as a looming black dog. It begins as a sense of terrible apprehension, of anxiety, that something is following you through the darkness. The heart will begin to pulsate and thump inside of the chest, and then something will happen. One of two options. Number one, the bar guest will simply bump its way past you. You'll actually totter slightly, and you'll feel that sensation of anxiety and dread just melt away. Did you hear that? Maybe we'll just go back this way instead. But it's through there, through the darkness of the old Snickleway. Shall we just go for it? Yeah, let's press on. Well, you don't want to be on your own. People have said that if the bar guest follows you home, your days are numbered. This sense of anxiety and dread will continue to follow and follow and follow until finally, one day, the lights will simply go out. And the last thing you'll see is a pair of blood-red eyes staring down at you as the edges of the vision darken. And finally, the lights go out. Now, how do we know about this? How do we know if people die that the last thing that they see is, in fact, the red eyes, the bloodshot red eyes of the bar guest of York? It's because of medical science. You see, a stopped ticker doesn't necessarily mean the end of days. A story I've told many a time about a gentleman who joined me for a tour, and he got into his head about this whole bar guest thing, and he went for a bit of a late night wander around York, and before he knew it, that sensation followed him home. Suddenly, there was something there with him. He said he felt the dryness of the mouth and then a pressure upon his chest. A heart attack racked its way through his body, and the last thing he saw were two red eyes staring down at him. But thankfully, he was resuscitated. A pacemaker was indeed fitted, and he's now stronger and more powerful than he ever has been before, and has promised me that one day, in safer, happier, healthier times, he will return to the city of York and join me for a tour. I said, that's fine. You're more than welcome. I might skip over the bit about the evil dog, because last time I told you about it, you went looking for the bloody thing and it nearly killed you. Anyway, come along, Mrs. D. We're going to have to maybe put a little bit of a stride on now if you want to get to all the places we've gone. We've been going for nearly an hour, would you believe? Nearly an hour. So, I think we're going to have to make a hard choice now.
Definitely the Shambles.
Definitely the Shambles. So, we're going to have to make a hard choice, my friends, otherwise this is going to last about 2 hours long. If we go to the right, that's going to take us back round towards the Plague House.
This is their left.
This is their left. Okay, so I tell you what, I'll give you a choice. We can either, I won't do the left or right, we can either go round to the Plague House and Beddon of York, or we can go down towards the Shambles and Coppergate. The choice is yours. Shambles or the Plague House? The Shambles or the Plague House? The Shambles or the Plague House? What are we getting? What are we getting? Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It's coming through. Obviously, I know there's a bit of a delay from me speaking to them here. So Shambles or Plague House?
Shambles?
Is it Shambles?
Plague House.
Plague House?
Plague House.
Plague House.
Rarely see the Shambles. Shambles.
You call it, Mrs. D. What do you want?
Ooh. If we go to the Plague House, will we reach the Shambles?
I tell you what, if we go to the Plague House, we will reach the Shambles, but we'd have to cut out Clifford's Tower at the end.
I think we go Shambles.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've already been the Minster, haven't we?
We have. Okay, we'll go this way. Okay. Well, actually, we could. I tell you what we could do. We could walk it and talk it.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's walk it and talk it. Let's do that. I don't want people to miss out on things. So I know you have people asking for things, and I don't want to miss out. So we might walk a bit quickly now. So.
We discuss Snickleway.
Oh yes, so Snickleway is effectively a made-up word that was coined in 1983 by Mark W. Jones. Mark W. Jones wrote an amazing book called something like A Walk Around the Snickleways of York, and what he did was it's oh gosh, what's the name of it? Is it a spoonerism? Is that the term? Is where you take a number of words and you squash them together. So very Yorkshire words for alleyways and such are, of course, a snicket, a ginnel, and an alleyway. And he took those three words and he smushed them together and he got Snickleway, the Snickleway of York. It's a word that genuinely makes a lot of people very angry. Not me, I bloody love it. I think it's a fantastic word. I was going to think the quickest way to get to it would be this way. So we're going to go back round through Minster Gates now. I mean, none of you mind if this. I mean, we did say an hour and a half, didn't we? I think we'll be all right. We just have to put a bit of. We're running. We're running. So you may have gathered now, friends, that as you've been with us, if you're new to the Deathly Dark Tours of York, it's I'm not the most serious ghost tour guide in the city of York. I do enjoy a good laugh. And that's exactly what I wanted to give you tonight. I wanted to maybe give you a few spooky stories, a little bit of a chilling here and there. But more than anything, I wanted to make you laugh. I wanted to entertain you and distract you for a little bit. And that's exactly what my walking tour is all about. So I'm hoping, please, that by Easter time, things will be back to some kind of semblance of normality. And I'll be out doing the tours. I normally run them every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm deciding I'm going to open it up 3 nights a week, and then we do an online thing of some description on a Monday. But as I said, after tonight, I'm taking some time off. I'm not. It's been a hell of a 10 months for all of us. Mrs. D and I have tried very hard to remain upbeat and positive and creative for 10 months, but it's
one of my favourite bits.
I need to hibernate. What's that?
This is one of my favourite bits of York, these trees.
Yes, this is Minster Gates area, the Minster Square. Sadly, of course, Minster School is now closed. Oh, the stonemason's yard that we mentioned earlier on. I'm going to do a quick walk-by ghost story. There was a woman standing here in 1967, admiring some sculptures, when suddenly a man wearing the outfit of a 16th century stonemason walked up to her, tapped her on the shoulder and went, "Do you like that? I made it," before just poof, disappearing entirely. Absolutely bonkers. It's known as the Queen's Path. Oh, so I didn't realise. Suddenly it's turned around and you were gone. Now you bloody know better than to leave me alone around here after what happened last time. Friends, there was an incident on one of my very early ghost tours last year where we were stood right here and suddenly, without warning, 3 very large knocks emanated from that red door, and we still to this day have genuinely no idea what they were or where indeed they came from. It's weird, isn't it? Don't peek in the windows. You never know what you're going to see. Actually, I do. See, it's just empty, isn't it? It's like, it's wine glasses and things. I don't no idea what it is. It's so bizarre. But anyway, the Plague House of York. There it is. Now, this is a story that I could spend half an hour on, but as we've got a lot of ground to cover, I want to get you through a lot of the sites tonight. Normally I do over November I was doing 2 different routes, and tonight I think I've ended up sort of squashing them both together. But yes, this whole area here is known as College Street. You see the lath and plaster timber frames here. This is all part. Just where are you going? You all right?
Everyone's saying it's a white door, not a red door.
It's definitely a red door. It's got a white frame with a... What the hell? I mean, obviously it's been painted in the last few days. Let's just not talk about that. That's bloody weird. Oh, I suddenly feel very warm. But yes, this is compose. This is College Street, formerly Vickers Lane, and it's this house right here. Now, obviously at the moment, even during my normal tours, I've been quite loath to talk about this because of everything that's going on in the world. Well, the Black Death arrived in York for the 6th outbreak in the 1600s, 1603 to 05, I think it was around those areas. Now, and what they used to do was if they suspected you had the Black Death, they would actually lock you away. They would barricade you inside your own house. They would lay heavy planks and wooden boards over the doors, the windows, and they would hammer them into place, paint a red X on the door, "Lord have mercy on us all," which when you think about it is a bit rich because the people painting it, they're outside and they're okay. It's the people inside trapped who are now stuffed. They would just leave them in there until they were dead. The belief was that once they had died, the disease would go with them. That wasn't entirely true. The incident that happened here is incredibly tragic. A young family member had the bubonic plague. He was boarded up with his family inside. They all passed away one by one until there was one single girl left. She actually climbed her way up into the highest part of the roof where she hid and isolated herself. People heard her calling and screaming and begging to be saved. People genuinely believed that the only way that anyone could have survived a plague house full of infectious death, was because they were a witch, they were a heretic, and they just left them be. Just left to be. It's the small window next to the drain pipe. That's the one. Sometimes people say they see a small child's face, white and round, staring down at the cobbles where I'm currently standing, where she would very likely have once played. She's known as a death echo or a shade. These spirits echo their former lives in death, and they have now become shades of their former selves. Absolutely tragic. It's one of the most heartbreaking stories in York. Again, on my actual tour, I go into much more detail about it, into the people involved and whatnot, but we're running against the clock. I don't want to rush us too hard, but I know a lot of you want to get to the Shambles. But the good news is that to get to the Shambles, we have to go through Beddon of York. Now, Beddon of York is one of my favourite areas in the city because it's almost magic. Now, when the city is thriving, when everything is humming and buzzing and up to its full capacity, it's a very, very noisy place. And suddenly, without warning, it becomes stone cold silent. The moment we enter Beddon of York, it suddenly becomes completely silent. Now, the Beddon area of York was actually a slum. It was a dangerous and lawless place. It was sort of forgotten by the authorities. People were just left to their own devices in there. Now, because sometimes around winter the nights would become long and cold and arduous, what else is there to do but to snuggle up warm with each other and have a little bit of the old repety-pumpety. Of course, with that comes the small children, and these people didn't have a lot of money to rub together. Fortunately, of course, when the children began to multiply in vast numbers, greater quantities, they suddenly found themselves with too many that they could care for, and they would be handed off to the industrial ragged school. One of them was run by a fellow by the name of George Pym, not far from here. And he was a hard-drinking, horrible man. He would actually use the money given to him to look after and care for these children. He would spend it on booze and women and waste it away night after night, day after day. But he was very charming, and he would often brush and scrub up very well. So when authorities visited to ask how the children were doing, this very well-kept, very pristinely turned out and charming gentleman would answer the door. And when they inquired, well, where are these children? We got some names on the books, but we can't find them anywhere. He would simply say, oh, I think they've just decided it wasn't for them, and they've ran away. You see, the industrial ragged schools would teach a trade. That was the idea. But more often than not, they'd speak out against George Pym, and he'd lose his temper. He would lash and thrash out, and it is believed that he even took the lives of half a dozen of the children in his charge. At one point, he became overwhelmed with the amount of young bodies he had that he started hiding them in his own wardrobe inside his own lodgings. This area was gentrified not that long ago in the grand scheme of the city of York. And when the architects came into the place to dig down into the soil to see what was what, they said they couldn't concentrate, they couldn't focus. They had a feeling that something was in here with them. Something was watching from the darkness. The Children of Beden is a myth that began to tumble around throughout history. There was one young gentleman who was digging down in the soil when he said he felt a hand suddenly fall down upon his shoulder and begin to squeeze with an alarming ferocity. When he sort of swatted it away and turned to see what was going on, there was nothing there at all. He packed up, he made his way home. He got ready to have a shower that night, and his wife suddenly gasped in horror when she saw on the back of his shoulder 3 fingers, heavy bruises, as if something had crushed the very flesh against the bone. The Children of Beden. We better get a bit of a hoof on Mrs. D. You all right? Looks like you had a question to ask me there. No. Just keeping an eye on the clock now. So I mentioned earlier on, it's a good job it came this way, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do the second half of the story. I mentioned the Grey Lady of the Theatre Royal of York earlier on. And it's just down here. There is a remnant left over, built into the side of the Evangelical Church of St. Andrew, not far from Sven Lane. This is Bartlegarth we're on now. Bartlegarth vaguely translates into Demon's Garden. A garden, a garth, a cloister. A Bartle was a small imp or a demon that would attach itself to you and bring you nothing but bad luck. God, there must be bloody thousands of those in the world at the moment, all just rallying around on our shoulders. There's not a lot of haunting particularly about this building, but there is one particular interesting piece of architecture built into the side of it, and it's reminiscent of the story of the Grey Lady I mentioned to you earlier on. Now, these are known as devil doors, or doorways into darkness, and I do have my shiny little torch with me here. We won't actually... course I've got a torch with me. And you might just be able to see it just there. It's suddenly the architecture of the church changes. You've got this old stone brickwork. And then, it's cold, isn't it? And then you've got the red brick there, the doorway. Now, it's highly likely that when the Grey Lady of York was punished for her sins, this is what happened. You see, she was a nun, and she worked in the old church and hospital of St. Leonard's, where the Theatre Royal, where we began our adventure tonight, currently stands. And she fell in love, and she was thrown into the darkness, and then the darkness was sealed in as the stones were bricked away one by one, until finally she was no more. Now, we don't know ultimately what took her life, whether it was malnutrition, starvation, dehydration. All we know is that the body has never been recovered, even to this very day. As I mentioned earlier on, people say they see a small glowing orb with a thin piece of ragged cloth trailing loosely behind it. They hear her dry, brittle fingernails scratching and scraping desperately to be set free. And of course, those terrible 3 words, "Let me out." Let me out. Haunting. So we're going to make our way now past Granary Court up towards King's Square. Now, I'm going to tell you the story of the King's Square ghost as we approach it, so we can go straight through into the Shambles, because I'd like to get you down towards. We were looking at maybe we'll try and get down towards Clifford Tower tonight. The only downside of Clifford Tower at the moment is it's having a new visitor centre built, so it's currently covered in white plastic and scaffolding. And I know it's going to look wonderful when it's finished, but at the moment it's not perhaps the most picturesque area. But there's something. We've got a little bit of a bonus thing we're going to do at the end of the tour. For those of you that want to hang around a little bit longer, we're going to go on a little bit of a bonus adventure as we head our way back towards Deathly HQ. So these days, let's be honest, the way that we get bad news is seemingly infinite. You know what I'm talking about. We've all got these little devices that live in our pockets, and they beep and they buzz, and the emails and the messages and the constant influx of information. And I'm genuinely I'm 40 years old. I'm not an old and ancient man. Some depends how cold it is in the morning, I suppose. But I remember a simpler time when, if you wanted to find out what was going on in the world, you kind of had to go looking for it. You had to read the news, watch the bulletins, whatever, the tune in news at 10, see what was going on. If you didn't want to know what was going on, sweet ignorance could be yours. We don't really have that luxury anymore, do we? It's a constant bombardment of good and, unfortunately at the moment, mostly bad. In the olden days, the way we would let people know if there was good or bad news was with music, or without music. The Waits of York, W-A-I-T-S, of York, were travelling minstrels who would make their way through the streets, and they would play music to let you know that things were or were not going well. If you heard the music playing at the prescribed time, it meant that everything was hunky-dory. If you did not hear the music at the prescribed time, it meant that something had somewhere gone tragically wrong. They would make their way up the Shambles here, up towards the York Minster, round towards the Theatre Royal, where they would end. And they were always accompanied by a woman wearing a long white dress. She had flowing brown curled hair. She would dance and spin and pirouette. And the interesting thing is this: the only people who could see this woman were the people who were in the higher windows. The ones looking down on a sort of 45-degree angle were the only ones that could witness with their own eyes this woman in the white dress. Now, before we enter the Shambles, a quick extra little bit of information here. The way that we would make people see ghosts in theatre in the olden days, before your holograms and computers and whatnot, was with reflected light. You would have an actor down in the choir or the orchestra pit. You would illuminate them with a vast quantity of light. There would be a piece of glass on a 45-degree plane that would then catch the light. It would catch the actor. It would create the image of a slightly see-through entity on stage. This was so convincing that the first time it was utilised the first time it was utilised in theatre, half the audience hoyed it out into the night in true terror. I just find it interesting that the only people who could witness the theatrical starlet were the ones looking down on a 45-degree angle. Coincidence, perhaps? Who knows? Well, you wanted it. A lot of you demanded it. And here, my friends, she is. The Shambles of York. The great flesh Shambles of York. And the great news is, it's currently all ours. It's all for us. Now, there is a possibility that we could do a 3-hour, 4, 5, 6 hour long show simply about the Shambles of York, but it is, as you can see, absolutely magnificent. There are parts of the Shambles here at the top that date back hundreds of years, giving you an indication of when the buildings used to lean in towards each other. In fact, if you join me just over here, underneath the Monk Bar Chocolatiers, you'll see that there are still some of the metalwork of the original hooks left over from when this was a butcher's district. There's just a few of them there poking down from out of the timbers. The hook would go through the meat, and then the hook end would go through the loop. The carcass would hang down. So if you ever stood around here just examining this Monk Bar Chocolatiers, and you suddenly get a slightly odd taste of pork in the mouth, chances are you've just inhaled a little bit of supernatural sausage. So, yeah. Now, I'm going to very briefly bring us to this pub here. This is Ye Old Shambles Tavern. Now, this is a wonderful story. It actually dates back to a matter of 2 or 3 years ago. There was a gentleman working in the bar here when suddenly, without warning, the whole contents of a shelf ejected themselves violently. And he did the most Yorkshire reaction I've ever seen. He simply went... Well, let me do it whilst we're on the phone. And that was about it. It's on YouTube. If you look for Ye Old Shambles Tavern Ghost, it's a cracking video. You'll enjoy it. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to want to see this. If you're a fan of ghosts, this is the York Ghost Merchants, one of my favourite shops here in York. Obviously closed at the moment, although they are still operating online. So if you do want to treat yourself to a tiny little spooky ghost, please do. Look at them there, tiny little. And it's got a good finger in the window. I was going to make a joke there, but I've obviously promised that this would be a family-based show, so I don't think I would do. But there was a point. Was that, sorry, Mrs.?
Watching whose granddad was born in the Shambles.
Really? Oh my gosh! Well, that's the biggest people. We're just going to say people used to live here. This was once a butcher's quarter of York. This is something going back to the Viking times when. People would come with me just in case. The people would everything would be squashed together. So you'd have a street of bakers, a street of cobblers, a street of butchers, and the Shambles was indeed a street of butchers. They all had butchers' shops and the hooks, and every single shop sold meat. And then there were the storerooms above there, and then on the third floors, just here, you had the rooms to rent. Those were very cheap, very cheap. Why were they very cheap? Well, because you're living above a butcher's storeroom, and the smell would have been absolutely despicable. Awful, you might say. You knew it was coming, didn't you? You knew it was coming, and you turned around in preparedness. So obviously this is normally where the Shambles market would be, but at the moment it's a bit of a sorry sight. I, for one, genuinely cannot wait until this is once again thriving, full of merchants and food trucks and whatnot. And is this where our friend is? Is this? Yeah. Yes, I'm going to do a little shameless plug for somebody. Why not? If you're a tattooed person, such as myself with Mrs. Death, we've got a couple of lovely pieces of ink. Our friend Amy here, Swamp Queen Art on Facebook. She does amazing work. She's quite new. She's well, I say quite new. She's been doing it for a few years now. We've trusted her to permanently mark ourselves with some fantastic designs, and she's just there. And like myself, she's an independent trader. She'll be coming back, I have no doubt, when it's safe and sound to do so. But I just wanted to bring you down through here. Hello. Yes, all the shops, all the butcher shops had people living above them. Now, they had to, of course, get rid of the wastage. Anything that they couldn't use, anything that they didn't like, anything that frightened or startled them a little bit, they would simply hurl it out into the street. You had 25 butcher's shops, you had dozens, perhaps hundreds of people living in the rooms to rent. Here's a wonderful bit of evidence of how the architecture used to look. Everything would simply be hurled out into the street and it would ooze its way. Steady on Mrs. D. That's nearly how a ghost was made right there. And of course all the leftover ruin, the offal, the feces, the urine, the nastiness, all the sweaty, terrible would land on the ground and it would ooze its way down here, ultimately parking itself outside what is now, in 2021, the front door of the biggest Greggs that I've ever seen. Ironic placement, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they've just got a cracking sense of humour. Now, next to the Golden Fleece is, of course, Greggs. I'll do it the other way around. Next to Greggs is the Golden Fleece. You can actually see they've got the lights twinkling on there. The Golden Fleece is the most haunted pub in all of York. York is often referred to as the most haunted city in England, and England is often referred to as the most haunted country in all of Europe. So, by that thinking, the Golden Fleece has to be the most haunted pub in the entire continent. I know we're not part of the EU anymore, but we're part of you. I don't really keep it. I've confused myself now. But either way, it's a big bloody haunted pub, ladies and gentlemen. The Golden Fleece of York. Now, again, I could do dozens of the ghosts there, but I'm just going to give you my favourite few because I do think I can actually get you down.
You just say big bloody pub.
It's a big bloody pub.
It's tiny.
No, but it goes back quite far. It goes back quite far. Now, the Golden Fleece opened in 1503. And it was a pub straight out the get-go. It was a tavern. There are older pubs in York, such as the Black Swan, which is down towards Peasham Green. That opened in 1417. But this one opened in 1503. And it is a lovely, cosy little pub. Can we perhaps have a little cheeky... We can actually have a little peek inside, look. Very, very cheeky. Let's be a little bit cheeky there. There you go. Look how cosy and lovely that is. Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous indeed. Someone just said, can we see the cats? Maybe Mrs. Deathley, maybe you could go out one day and do a cat hunt.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we were thinking, because obviously I'm going to take a bit of time off over February, but maybe Mrs. Deathley and a friend.
Oh, that's so me.
You could go off and do the cat hunt together, maybe mid-February.
I'm not allowed a friend.
What's that?
I'm not allowed.
Well, it's exercise. You're going out for exercise together. We'll figure out the science. But yes, anyway, the Golden Fleece. Sorry, we're walking away before we told the stories of it.
So excited about cats.
So excited about cats. Jeff Monroe. Jeff Monroe was a Canadian airman. 2 stories. One was that he came parachuting down on a training exercise, went straight through the roof of the Golden Fleece, tangled himself up in his parachute cords and hanged himself by the neck. Another story is that he was polishing his boots and he fell out of a window, tumbled all the way down, broke his neck instantly. Either way, people making their way towards the highest room have said they've seen a pair of little booties just kind of fidgeting and twitching in their final moments, performing what is known as the hangman's jig, that final act of rebellion the body puts itself through before the lights truly go out. We'll walk and talk, I believe. There is, of course, little Jeremy. Poor little Jeremy. Oh, poor little Jeremy. He was playing a game at the bottom of the Shambles when suddenly and without warning, a horse broke free from a nearby flesh market, went straight over the top of him, snuffed out his life like a candle. He's often seen standing in the middle window of the Golden Fleece, silhouetted when the curtains are closed, the lights are on, not greatly dissimilar to the spirit of the Grey Lady of York. He's known again, death echo, shade, staring down at the point where his final moments were spent, just thinking to himself, if only I wasn't there on that fateful moment, on that terrifying and fateful day. I think we can cross it for really quick.
We are on 17% battery.
17%? We better get a move on then, haven't we? Do-do-do-do-do. Zoobity bow, and let's do it. Hop, 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 hop. This is like that bloody tour de York we did all this. We did a cycling tour of York, and I had a tiny phone at the time, and the battery nearly ran out. And I ended up cycling at full speed towards the hanging ground of the Knavesmire. It's very exciting. Very exciting. So I might do is we'll hit the points I want to hit, but we'll hit them quick. just so I can get people down to the final story that I want to tell tonight. One that I believe is one of the most bone-chilling, spine-tingling ones. We'll have a very brief stop at a giant dangling knocker for people to enjoy. This is the Church of All Saints and Pavement. Full title, of course, the parish of the All Saints Pavement with St Crux and St Michael's Burial Gate, but we call it, of course, All Saints. But here she is, a lovely little knocker. Let me just throw a bit of light onto the situation.
I think you're the only thing blocking it.
There you go. If I get out of the way, is that up?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So that there is believed to be a beast of hell, slowly consuming a small and innocent child. But the strange thing is, if you look at it, it does appear that the child has gone in legs first and is grinning wildly from ear to ear. I don't know about you, but if I'd been squashed to death, slowly consumed like some kind of terrible snake legs first, I don't think I'd be smiling about the situation. But who am I to judge? Who indeed? Oh, they've not got the Christmas lights down at Coppergate yet, have they? Oh dear me, indeed. Here we go.
You know what?
What's that?
I think we should do our... Yeah, I don't think we're going to get too long.
No, we'll do. I'm going to end at Coppergate. That's the plan. So, friends, we're about to enter our final stories now. If you have enjoyed yourself tonight, and you have had a good time, of course, this has been entirely free to watch. Perhaps Dolores could post the link if she hasn't done already. The pay what you feel. That's the way we sort of do these things. On if you have enjoyed tonight, please do chip a quid or a few in paypal.me/Dorian Deathly. Honest to goodness, everything helps at the moment because we're not entirely sure when things can go back to whatever the new normal is. But we're now entering Coppergate Walk down towards St Mary's Square, and one of my favourite stories here. This is a very changeable area. Over the years, it's been all manner of different sites. It's been residences for the wealthy, for the poor. It was a giant sweet factory by the name of Cravens of York. In the 1970s and 80s, they started digging down, and that's when they found all the Viking ruins and remains, leading, of course, to the Jorvik Viking Centre. Now, the story I'm going to tell you about here is a story that happened when it was very extravagant housing for the wealthy. There was a woman who lived here, and she was incredibly wealthy, incredibly rich, or so they thought. They believed that she had all of her money hidden away inside of her walls. All the silver in the coin was actually secreted away inside of the cavities of her own home. She married young and she was lovely, but her husband passed away very young, and it just broke her. It soured her. She became this angry, vengeful old woman. People wouldn't work for her because she would often find ways to strip them of their money. One night, there was a young couple making their way through this part, and suddenly, and without warning, they heard this blood-curdling scream. They heard this awful, gut-wrenching wail. Now, the gentleman, wanting to impress the young girl he was with, he bashed his way through the door, he ran up the stairs, and what he found horrified him. The woman had actually began to claw the skin from her own face. She had red lines where her fingernails had gouged away the skin. They managed to restrain her, to calm her down, got a bit of drink inside, calmed her down, managed to get an answer. What have you seen? What has happened? And that's when it took place. Now, what she said she saw was as follows. She got herself ready for bed that night, tucked herself in, pulled up the covers around the chest, and then she looked over towards the corner of the room, and she thought, for a moment, she could see a figure standing there. It must be nothing but a hanging nightgown, she thought. And suddenly, from the shadows stepped a young man, and she immediately recognized the man as her husband, looking exactly the way he did on the day of his death. Now, he warned her. He warned her of the following. You have to change your ways, my love, he said. If you carry on down this long and horrible road, treating people with the hatred and disdain that you have done for all these years, terrible things await you. Terrible, dark, sinister, foreboding nightmares upon the other side. So she had a choice. She could have immediately sorted out her ways and made good life choices, or she could have carried on down the path that had polluted her soul, shall we say. Yeah, she chose the bad one. Her final words were, everything I've done was earned. Everything I have handed out into this world was deserved. I won't change a word of it. And with that, she dropped dead. Now, the house went into a sort of strange sense of hibernation for a while, and for a little bit of time, nobody could do anything. You see, the construction and the development, this retail area stalled due to the discovery of all of the Viking relics and whatnot, but this particular house sort of fought against the development because nobody could stay in there for too long. They would often feel as if there was something in there with them. There was one particular room with a pair of sliding doors that when they were closed, people would feel almost suffocated. They would smell an odd sort of stink of burning, sulphur. Some even said that from time to time they would see a gnarled reflection of a woman staring back at them with hatred and disdain in her eyes. A lot of people have drawn parallels to Christmas Carol, of course. Jacob Marley, Ebenezer Scrooge, Change Your Ways, which is interesting because the story that I told you about back at the Minster, shall I say, about the young girl and the brother and the navy, what we actually found out was, or say what Mackenzie from Shadows of York found out was that that's actually a story that was written by Charles Dickens. But here's the kick. We don't know whether it's actually a story he wrote that then became a sort of local folklore, or whether it was a local folklore that then became a story that he wrote, because he visited York all the time. He loved it here. So it's very possible that the story was actually told to him, and then he turned it into a short little novella of his own, or it's something that he wrote, and then it was appropriated and turned into something altogether of the otherness. How long do you reckon we have left, Mrs. Deathley, battery-wise?
It's not updated me since 17.
Okay. Let's just crack on a little bit further, shall we? Let's crack on. Let's see if we can get to our final point. So we wanted, of course, to get you round to Turpin's grave tonight, but I don't think we're going to make it there. It's a good 10-minute walk from here. But what I wanted to do was to bring you round to Clifford Tower and to share with you a little bit of hope in these odd and awful times. I am Dorian Deathley. This is my wonderful wife, Dee Dee Deathley. We do, of course, have Dolores Deathley and Daphne Deathley and David Deathley, March the 8th. That's something I should point out. March 8th. March 8th. David Deathley, our new tour guide, will be running the Great Ghost Hunt of Edinburgh. That's something we've not done before. We're expanding. But obviously these are strange and peculiar times. A lot of us aren't doing too well at the moment, and genuinely my heart goes out to you. I'm one of them. I'm not ashamed to say I'm not particularly handling the third lockdown very well at all. But just through here is a final little glimmer of hope. I'm about to show you, my friends, in the shadow of Clifford Tower, just up here where the architecture and the scaffolding has been rebuilt, there still stands one little Christmas tree. And this wonderful little Christmas tree is covered from head to toe in twinkling, beautiful LED lights. And sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by everything, I'm feeling a little bit, finding it difficult almost to find a moment to see an end to all of this. When is it time we can see our families again? When is it time? I have a new nephew. He's about this big. He's about this big now, actually. He's bloody massive. They keep feeding him. He keeps getting bigger and stuff. I've not given him a little cuddle in 11 months, maybe even longer. So I know we're all in this situation, but it will end. It will end. We'll get out the other side and we'll be stronger and better. And I tell you what, who's going to turn down an offer to go to the pub after this? Like about a year ago, do you want to go to the pub tonight? Nah, I might have a night in. Yeah, we ain't going to be doing that for a while, are we? Literally going to be frothing at the mouth just to go out for a quiet pint. Mrs. Deathley and I are fans of the quiet, cosy pubs with a lovely fireplace and perhaps a fat dog in the corner. We'll never say no. But I really did want to get you round to this lovely tree tonight because it's an absolute work of art. Now, I have to apologise that we might cut out very suddenly, and also you might just hear there is a sort of keep away the youth alarm. Oh, there it is. It squeals and it squeaks. It's one of those high-pitched whistles that you can hear. It says that my hearing hasn't completely gone yet. There it is. And I think that's about where we're going to end. We'll get ourselves underneath the tree.
I'm going to go in a bit closer, but you should not, because of your ears.
Oh yes, just stay back because my ears. I've been. Yeah, well, we won't get into that right now. But there goes Mrs. Deathley. She's going to go a little closer to it. But there you have it, friends. Thank you so much, genuinely, for joining us tonight. It's been a wonderful distraction for myself and Mrs. Deathley. I do hope you have enjoyed yourself as I take you on a bit of a ramshackle, who knows where we're going to go, tour of the city of York. One final time, if you do want to chip anything in, greatly appreciated. We will post a link on our Facebook page to follow it through. paypal.me/Dorian Deathley. It all goes genuinely to paying the bills and the mortgage and just keeping us ticking over. Means that we can keep doing things like this as well, and we would love to keep doing things like this. That's it, isn't it? What do you reckon? Yeah. Shall we go have a cup of tea, love?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, have a cup of tea.
Please.
Thank you, everyone. Safe journeys.
Nice.
Take care. Mrs. Deathley wants to say a few words.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the Deathly Horde for keeping us going. And loads of people watching tonight, which was really lovely.
Really lovely to see.
2.5 thousand people at one point, which was...
2.5 thousand people? That's very strange. Very strange. There you go. I've just seen someone say there are no, you're not wearing masks.
Oh no, we've got them. Don't you worry.
We live together. We're a bubble. This is a deathly bubble right here, and I don't think we've been within 20 feet of another human all night.
Or each other, to be fair.
Or each other. No, we normally stay 20 feet away from each other at the best of times. But I'll let you kill the old stream. Safe journeys, friends. Be well. Stay spooky. Stay safe. Deathly's out.